Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen and Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Now today's recipe is all about these, the Seville orange or bitter orange. It is one of the few types of fruits, vegetables that still is seasonal to us. Anyway, to us here. Pretty much only see these the end of January, beginning of February. And so I bought them and I was going to make my grandmother's orange marmalade recipe because I really like orange marmalade. But I thought, let's check out what's in some of the old cookbooks. So I went through the old cookbooks and there's so many orange marmalade recipes, but they're all pretty much the same. They all pretty much have the same proportions of fruit, sugar, and water, and they all follow essentially the same method, with the exception of a couple of outliers. There are some that add different spices. Most of them just have fruit. Some of them add spices. And then there's this one in the mixing bowl, published by the Ladies Welland County General Hospital in Welland, Ontario, which is down by Niagara Falls, not too far from here. And there's two recipes on this page, and they both have the same proportions. They both have the same method. The one I chose is called Scotch Marmalade. And of course, it adds scotch at the end. And the method is completely different than the one that I would make based on my grandmother's recipe. So we're going to start out with the bitter orange, a sweet orange, and a lemon. And I'm going to slice these up and put the fruit into this pot. In my grandmother's recipe, you would peel the fruit, squeeze the fruit, keep the pulp separate, and then slice up the rind. And you would deal with everything separately. This one puts everything into the same pot. So I'm kind of interested to see what happens. It also tells me to take the seeds out and boil them in a separate pot. We'll see how that goes. So here we are, slicing up the last lemon. This method is a bit of a pain, making sure that I could get all of the seeds out without getting them into the pot. I think I did fairly well, but I really prefer the other method, which is juice the oranges, then cut up the peel, and then what's left over, the pulp, you put it into a muslin bag, and you put the muslin bag into the pot. And then you can remove the muslin bag, and it takes all of the pulp and the seeds and everything with it. I probably do like that method better, but, you know, this one will work out fine, I think. Now, if you've never had a Seville orange or bitter orange, it's called an orange. It looks like an orange. It definitely looks like an orange. But when you taste it, it is super bitter. Doesn't quite have the acidity of a lemon. You know how a lemon, you get that acid. They're bitter, but you get that acid. Same with a lime. They're bitter, but you get that acid. This is a little bit lower acid, full-on mouth-puckering bitter. Okay, we'll scrape up all the seeds, and they go into this small pot. Now, into the seeds, I put some water, and I'm supposed to bring this to a boil. It doesn't say how long. It just says cook separately in water and add to the fruit kettle. Now, the directions aren't terribly clear whether I do this now or if I wait until I'm boiling this. So I'm going to put water in here, and then this sits for 36 hours. And I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is the sugar and the acid from all of the fruits, from the two different kinds of oranges and from the lemon, are going to soften the pith and the peel. The juice is going to be extracted from the pulp. And then when we go to boil this, it's going to soften much easier. You're going to get a better texture in the final jam. So I'm just going to put a lid on this. I'm going to let it go for 36 hours. I'm going to wait until that cooks. I'm going to strain that liquid into here, and then I will see you in a couple of days. Welcome back. So our mixture has sat a little bit more than 36 hours, and I thought it might ferment a little bit, but it didn't. And I don't know that if it fermented a little bit over that time period, it would be a bad thing. I think that would help break down and soften some of the flavors and also the toughness of the peel. But at any rate, this is now going to come up to temperature, and I'm going to let it boil for 2 hours. It doesn't say whether I need to leave the lid on or off, but I may split the difference and just sort of put a lid on, covering it partially, still allowing the steam out. Let's see what happens. Okay, this has been boiling for just over 2 hours now, and you want to give it a taste test, but you're not taste testing it. You want to test the peel, how soft it is, and it's going to be bitter. It's not pleasant at all. So let's just let's give this a try. Okay. Oh, that's a horrible, absolutely horrible. Really bitter. A little bit of orange flavor in there, but it is heavily overridden by bitter. But the peel is the right consistency. This whole boiling process is partly about extracting pectin from the skins and the pith and the membranes. Boiling the seeds was also about extracting pectin, and the pectin is partly what's going to thicken this into a jelly. But as soon as we put the sugar in, the peels will start to firm up again. And so if we didn't break them down to a really soft point, they never would break down. That's why we don't put the sugar in right away. And then you would just end up with orange peel in your marmalade, which isn't fun either. So we're going to put in the sugar. And yeah, this is a lot of sugar. Sugar is a preservative, so it will keep this from going bad. Sugar will make it palatable because it is terribly bitter right now. And there's a lot of people who always tell me, oh, no one in the Depression could afford that. This is from 1930. No one in the Depression could afford that much sugar. And true and not true. I mean, there were a lot of people who were out of work. I think unemployment was about 20%. And so there were a lot of people who could not afford this sort of thing. But this, again, is a recipe that you would make once a year. And you would make enough jam to last the entire year. And you would make a jam, or in this case, a marmalade, that is something that is maybe just for special occasions. And you would make it and you would trade it with your other family members who might make strawberry jam, or they might make something else. So there still were a lot of people who could afford that much sugar. And really, the expensive thing in this pot in 1930 would be the oranges. So the sugar would be the easiest thing. Now we are going to bring this back to a boil. And we're going to boil this until it reaches the set point. And the set point is a temperature at which the pectin and the sugar and everything works together to create that sort of jelly. We'll make it stiff as it cools. And the set point for this particular recipe is about 220 degrees Fahrenheit. And I say about because it depends on your altitude. So 220, if you shoot for 220 in most places in North America, you're going to be in the right spot. And that should take about an hour. But you don't want to go too far from this. You want to stir it every once in a while. You want to be careful because you've now reached the point with the sugar in here and you've reduced the water to the point where it could scorch, it could burn, and you don't want that to happen either. So while this bubbles away, I'm going to get all of my jars ready and my water bath canner ready to go so that we can jar this up. I think we're almost there. I've got all of the jars are sterilized, ready to go. I've got my pot of water here for the hot water bath canner going. I've got lids and other stuff back here that are ready to go, and we are at 221 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think we're really close. The last ingredient, it says just before the end, add 1 wine glass of whiskey just before removing from the fire. So not sure how much a wine glass is. I mean, I know that there's an actual measurement for wine glass, but of course, if everybody was just pulling a wine glass out of their cupboard, it could be a completely different size. I'm going to pour in about a half a cup and see where that gets us. Now, of course, if you are averse to alcohol for any reason, ethical, religious, whatever, you can leave it out. This is the only recipe that I have ever seen that adds whiskey in. And I thought I'm going to put it in just to see what happens, just to see what it brings flavor-wise, what it brings flavor-wise. But also I know that alcohol releases other flavors, and I wonder what that is. So, one last check of the temperature, and we'll start filling the jars. Okay, the last jar that I will be canning, and then I'm going to put some in that other jar, put in the fridge right away so that I can start eating it tomorrow morning. Now this is a hot water canner. I should really do a full-on canning video series at some point. But the idea is there's a rack that I'm going to lower that all of the jars are on. The water is going to come up to a boil. I'm going to put the lid, okay. I'm going to put the lid back on. The water will come up to a boil, and I'm going to start a timer when the water comes back to the boil. And there's varying ideas on the length of time, but generally if you go 12 to 15 minutes, most people think that brings you to the right place. Now you're only able to do this with foods that are high acid. If you have a food that isn't high acid, you need to do it in a pressure canner, which brings the temperature up even higher under pressure. That's the only way to do things like certain tomato sauces or anything with meat. You've got to bring it up to that higher temperature. So I'm going to lower this in, and the water covers the top of the jars. Put the lid back on. When it comes up to a boil, I will start the timer. Okay, Jules.
Okay, so we're back to try the
Yeah.
marmalade.
So we just had dinner, and we made this. I made this oven mac and cheese.
Which was very good, but we're
Very good.
turning to try out, which I incorrectly called jam earlier.
Yeah, so it's
Because
marmalade.
it is marmalade.
It's marmalade. So it's called Scotch Marmalade or Scots Marmalade. What does it actually say? Scotch Marmalade.
Oh, that's kind of anyway.
And I thought it was called, when I first read it, I thought it was called Scotch Marmalade because it ties into one of the origin stories of orange marmalade. That
Everybody loves a good story.
Yeah.
So we're going to ignore the story.
Yeah.
What is actually the origin of marmalade then? Do you know?
So marmalade originally is a Portuguese or Spanish word that refers to quince. And quince is a proto-apple.
I'm having a hard time connecting that to the...
So quince was made into a jelly. The English get it in the 1500s. The king has it, loves it, orders up more and more and more. And of course, then the English are like, well, what else can we do it with? And oranges are full of pectin, and the seeds are full of pectin. So just like quince, it could be made into a jelly.
There you go.
So the earliest written recipe that they can find for orange marmalade is 1670.
Wow. That's...
A handwritten manuscript. Oh,
I'm making a mess as I pull it out. You got the peels in there.
okay, I love that.
This is going to be completely different because I'm so used to the one that we always make with the carrots.
Yes. You might not like it. It's going to be too bitter for you.
Yep, not for me.
Yeah. So
Now, it's got a great texture.
it's got good texture. It's got a sweet flavor, and then that bitter comes in and gets you at the
And
end.
it's also that citrus. I'm not a big citrus fan, so those two things together. You never notice he never makes things he doesn't like? I'm just saying.
And so I put the scotch in at the end, Calls for half a wine glass of scotch.
Oh, actual Scotch in it.
Yeah,
Oh.
so I put in a half a cup of scotch, and the scotch adds it's very subtle. It's in there. I know that it's in there because I put it in. You might not have
I did
picked it
not
up
notice.
because it's too bitter.
All I could taste was the.
But it adds a nice layer of flavor, and I think you could probably put more in and amp that flavor up, and it might bring the bitterness down.
You may not even need it though, as well.
You might no. If you don't want it, you don't put it in. You could combat the bitterness in this by swapping out one or more of the Seville oranges with another sweet orange to take down that bitterness, and you could put more sugar in also, which would counteract the bitterness. But I like
Clearly,
that.
he's not going to change the recipe in any way.
That's the way I like it. Now, you're supposed to put this on toast. I want to know from our English viewers. My experience with English people eating toast is it goes in that rack.
Is that just a TV thing?
Is that just a TV thing? Do you actually put your toast in a rack? I don't get it. Please tell me in the comments below.
Because you never know what to believe when you see what
When you see stuff on TV. And another note, one of the jars in the canner broke. The bottom fell off. So it was obviously a flawed jar.
I mean, we use our jars. It could be something that we've dropped something else. It could have got damaged in washing the dishes.
Who knows how old that jar is? But you will occasionally. I mean, I think that's the first one I've had in.
I don't know that I've ever had one actually break in the.
I don't remember that I've ever had one, so that may be the first one I've ever had break. But it will happen. It could happen. It does happen. You know, what are you going to do about it? So,
get your toast out.
yeah, more than you wanted to know.
That's a lot of toast you've got to eat there, Glenn.
More than you ever wanted to know about orange marmalade and some orange marmalade to eat. So thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.